Hey, welcome to the Classic Guitar Rock update. I don't need these headphones on. You mind if I take them off? I'm Jeremy. Thanks for joining me. I was on spring break last week. We spent the whole week in the middle of nowhere in Montana, so I was not able to do an update, but we're back. We've got some emails to get to and some news items, so let's hop right to it. The date today, April 10th, Monday, 2023. Here's an email. Hey, CGR, big fan of your podcast. Just found you on YouTube and am enjoying the updates. Thank you. One of my favorite bands of the late 80s was Extreme. Have you had a chance to hear their new single? What do you think? Cyrus L., Shreveport, Louisiana. Cyrus, I have heard the new tune from Extreme. And one of my news items I want to talk about today is kind of related to that. So we'll get to that. I love the new Extreme song. I love Nuno's guitar solo. It's incredible. I think I've mentioned it on an update. It's awesome. And so I'm going to save some things I want to say till I get to the news portion. But thank you so much for your email, Cyrus. By the way, you can email me, classicguitarrock@mail.com. I'd love to hear from you. Any suggestions, complaints, comments, questions. I love to hear great classic rock experiences, albums that mean a lot to you, artists that mean a lot to you, concerts that meant a lot to you. I love to hear that. So email me, classicguitarrock@mail.com. Next email. Hi, Jeremy. I've heard you mention several times how with our favorite classic rock artists aging, we will have to see more and more bands tour without original members. I get that. But it kind of rankles me to see bands like Skynyrd and Foreigner about to tour with 0 original members. What do you think? I'll keep listening. Sandy Newberry. Sandy, thank you so much. Yeah, that's kind of a common refrain. I have mentioned that a lot. You know, our classic rock icons, our classic rock heroes, they are all only human. They're getting older. That means they die or their health deteriorates to a point that they can't tour anymore. And so bands are left with the decision, okay, there's still an audience. There's still people willing to pay. Do we call it quits? Do we continue to tour? Do we do like Kiss and just continue to tour and tour and tour and tour? And Kiss, by the way, continues to sell out concerts. So part of me, I mean, the purist in me, I'm like you, Sandy. The purist in me thinks you guys should give it up, right? But the business side, the reality side, makes me think, hey, if I'm in this band and there's still people paying to come see us, willing to pay to come see us, then why would we stop? And alongside of that is, let's use Foreigner as an example. It is true that Mick Jones has played a very diminished role, like he play a song or two with the band. And now the talk is that he may not play at all in this next tour, but they also say it's the last tour. The touring Foreigner band is an excellent band. Excellent musicians. Kelly Hansen does a great job singing those Lou Gramm songs, right? So on the one hand, a lot of people say, hey, if it ain't got Lou Gramm, it ain't Foreigner, right? On the other hand, they're really good. They sound really good. So do we just hard and fast say no original members, you got to stop? And that means we don't hear live Foreigner music, even though the live Foreigner music we hear from this Kelly Hansen version of the band sounds pretty dang good. It's a tough call, right? It's a tough call. Personally, I am going to see the Foreigner band this spring when they roll through my town. I will see Journey when they roll through my town without Steve Perry. And I have seen. and it's an awesome live show. So I don't know. I understand the purist aspect, right? It's not even the original members. It's not Steve Perry. It's not Lou Gramm, and blah, blah, blah. But at the same time, they're pretty good live bands. So I know I'm not answering your question, but that's just going to happen more and more. And by the way, I want to touch on this a little bit more in one of our news items today also. Thanks for the email, Sandy. Another email. Hi, guys. When I was about 12 years old, my sister bought me the REO Speedwagon album, High Infidelity. I love that album. Still do. Why is it that REO Speedwagon gets so little respect? A happy listener. I could do a whole episode just on this. I'm probably just a year, well, depending on when you got the album. I got this album when I was about 13 or 14, so about around the same age, shortly after it came out. I loved High Infidelity. That was my introduction to REO Speedwagon. From there, I kind of went back and got some of their other stuff. A lot of the classic rock snobs, think that High Infidelity is where REO Speedwagon sold out. There's nothing wrong with making money, guys. Nothing wrong with making money on an album. So I don't like the term sell out. A good album's a good album, whether it sold millions or not, right? I love the album. I love REO Speedwagon. Gary Richrath, one of the undersung guitar heroes of the 70s. The dude was awesome. They had some great albums. They did get a little softer after this album. Good Trouble, the follow-up album, was even softer than High Infidelity. And then what was the one with Can't Fight This Feeling? Then they became a monster ballad band. Whatever. Bands change. But there is a bias. There's a bias against several bands of this generation, and I'll mention them, right? REO Speedwagon, Styx, Foreigner, Journey. In fact, I used to have a teacher. He referred to all these. He called them REO Journey Wagon. Right? He lumped all these bands together. I kind of see where he was coming from, right? But a lot of great music. Styx, Foreigner, REO Speedwagon, Journey. What do these all have in common? With the exception of Journey, none of these bands are in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, right? And yet Nina Simone is. Tom Waits is in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, but Foreigner and Styx and REO Speedwagon aren't. Is there anything wrong with that picture? So yes, there is an absolute bias against rock bands that were mainstream and successful. That's just the way it is. That doesn't mean it wasn't great music. I love all of these bands. Foreigner, REO Speedwagon, Styx, Journey, they're all awesome. Great musicians, great vocals. They're good albums. And so what happens in music is we tend to punish people that are popular, right? How Foreigner and Styx and REO Speedwagon are not in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame baffles the mind. How can that be? Think of the millions of albums that they sold, and yet Nina Simone and Tom Waits are in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. And I'm not bashing them, but most people have never heard of them. So how big a rock act could they be if you never heard of them? And yet everyone knows of Foreigner and Styx and REO Speedwagon. They aren't in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. That's a whole nother subject. The Rock and Roll Hall of Fame is a complete joke, steaming pile of crap. Gets me worked up just talking about it. But to answer your question, I love REO Speedwagon. I love Gary Richrath. I love Kevin Cronin. They still go out and perform live, and they still sound good. Go see them. Again, not with all the original members, but most of them, right, that are still alive. So big fan of REO Speedwagon, big fan of High Infidelity. Last email. Dude, Watch out when an email starts with dude, exclamation point. Dude, when are you going to post a new episode of the podcast? The YouTube updates are fine, but I prefer the actual podcast. Hope to hear a new one soon. Brock the Rock. Thanks, Brock the Rock. Thanks for listening. I have no excuse. I've been busy. John's been busy. We just haven't got together to do a podcast episode. I'm gonna commit this week. There will be a new podcast episode out. Thank you for your patience. And you know what? I'm even gonna sneak this out. This is some breaking news. Our next episode will be about Whitesnake. I'm kind of working on an episode on Whitesnake. We'll have that out this week. But Brock, thanks for listening. Thanks for your email. Again, any of you can email me, classicguitarrock@mail.com. I would love to hear from you. So shoot me an email. All right, some news items. Mentioned it earlier. This will kind of bring in a couple topics. We talked about the email. I think it was Sandy. The email that Sandy said, talking about our favorites getting older, right? Original members are dying, or because of health, they're unable to tour. So I've got a news item around this. It's related. You'll see how it's related. So last week, I was out all last week, so I missed a lot of this. But last week, Mick Mars of Motley Crue filed a lawsuit against the band. Now, there's a few dynamics going on here. Remember, a few months ago, there was an announcement that Mick would be retiring due to health. Retiring as the touring guitarist. The implication there was that he would continue to be part of the band and work on recordings and that sort of thing. That was how it was originally presented. What was interesting in all of that is we never heard from Mick in any of that. Well, we heard from Mick last week when he filed the lawsuit. Come to find out that he claims he was pushed out, he was forced to retire, and that the band has then tried to basically minimize his ownership in the band. Now, guys, is there anything more unrock and roll than having to hear about retirement agreements and entanglements with your favorite rock band? And this is not the only band that it's happening in, right? Sorry, I adjusted my camera there. So in this lawsuit, I'm not going to get into all the legalese, but Mick Mars is a 25% owner, or 20% owner, I guess, 25% owner in the band. And when you say 25% owner in a band, what does that mean? Well, bands typically they've got their albums, obviously. They've got the touring entity. They've got merchandising. They've got bands are businesses, right? So they will think of a band like Kiss that is huge. Kiss is a huge business with all kinds of parts and pieces to the business. Well, Mick owns 25% of Motley Crue. Part of that is touring. Part of that is album sales and all of that. Well, he claims that they're trying to whittle away his percentages down to like 5%. That might have been related to just the touring. I don't remember all the details, but it's getting ugly between Mick and the rest of the band. And in fact, Mick claims that they were playing to backing tracks in the last tour. He says that Nikki Sixx never played a single note live. All of Mickey's parts were recorded. He says at least some of Tommy's were recorded because there's video. You can see it. There's video of the drums starting and Tommy's not behind them. Mick says he played his parts live. But there's some really unsavory things that come out in this. He claims that for the last 10, 15 years that Nicky's the leader of the band. He's really the business leader of the band. He claims that Nicky especially has been harping on Mick, telling him that he's lost his memory, that he's can't physically do it, that he's forgetting all of his guitar parts. And Mick is pushing back, saying that is not true. And in fact, he says, I've been carrying those guys for the last 10 years. They brought John 5 in as a touring guitarist. I love John 5. I think John 5's great. I was glad when he wasn't with Marilyn Manson anymore, because Marilyn Manson's weird. Never liked Marilyn Manson, but I always liked John 5. Thought he was a great guitar player and a cool guy. So they bring John 5 in. Mick hasn't said anything about John 5. John 5's a hired gun, right? He's not really involved in this. But it will be interesting to see how this plays out. Now, if you don't listen to Full in Bloom, listen to Full in Bloom YouTube channel. Full in Bloom has a lot of great interviews and news updates. He recently had KK Downing on. KK Downing says his experience with Judas Priest was very similar to what Mick Mars is going through. So KK very much sides with Mick Mars in this whole situation. I'm not going to get into that whole Judas Priest thing, but basically the same sort of thing happens. And it just shines a spotlight on this whole issue having to do with retirement. Back in the 70s, did you ever think we'd be dealing with classic rock bands' retirement plans and policies? It's funny, but this is just the beginning. We're going to be seeing more and more retirement issues around these bands. We already mentioned bands touring without original members. People are going to get old. They're going to retire. They're going to pass away. This is only the beginning. This is the tip of the iceberg. But it will be interesting to see what happens and plays out between Motley Crue. It's always sad when legal stuff happens because it pits the fan base against each other. For the last year, we've heard all of these issues with Journey, lawsuits between members, and it's just fractures the fan base, and it's sad, but it's just the world we live in as rock stars get old and crotchety, right? There's just going to be more of that coming up. Okay, another news item. We mentioned Extreme earlier. Extreme has a new album coming out. They released the single about 3 weeks ago. It's phenomenal. It's got a great lead break it's so good to see them back. Why am I bringing that up? Because I want to make sure you're aware of another new album that's coming out in May from Winger. Winger, you know what? Extreme too. Let's talk about Extreme. Let's talk about Winger. Let's talk about a band. Remember a band called Giant in the late 80s, early 90s, 1990? Okay, there was a slew of great melodic hard rock bands in the late 80s, early 90s that were really good and really talented. Winger, Extreme, Giant. There's more. Another band that wasn't new, they were kind of a super group, Damn Yankees. Okay, I could lump them in. And what's the point I'm making? There were a lot of these bands from that time frame that showed so much great potential, that had super great musicianship, they had stage presence, they had great albums, great production. They looked like they would be the next, big bands in hard rock. And then there's this thing called grunge, right? I don't mean to sound like the old man yelling at kids to stay off his lawn, but grunge came in the early 90s, and all of these bands like Winger, like Extreme, like Giant were gone. Okay? That doesn't mean they weren't awesome. They were awesome. But the music tastes change. Let me rephrase that. The music company tastes changed. There were still people that loved that music, but the record companies in the late 80s, early 90s, there was zero vision, zero creativity. It was let's copycat. This band called Nirvana breaks, Pearl Jam breaks. And so then every band is only signing bands that wear flannel shirts, right? That's all they want. Oh, no. We don't want spandex. We don't want that hard rock. That's not what the kids want anymore, right? Well, the reality is there were a lot of kids that did want it because these were very popular bands. Winger did very well. Extreme did well. Giant was doing well. But the record companies decided, here's what we're going to do now. Zero support for these bands. It was all about the Seattle sound. It was all about grunge. And this is not dissing grunge, right? It's more a diss on the record companies. So all of these bands, remember Beavis and Butthead making fun of Winger, right? They wore the shirt with Winger. So all of a sudden, Winger wasn't cool anymore. Well, at least that's the image that MTV and corporate record companies wanted you to think, because they wanted it all about grunge. So many of these bands went from being very successful to no one wanted them anymore. Okay? Why am I bringing up Winger? Because Winger has a new album coming out in May. They dropped a new single today called It All Comes Back Around. They say it's a power ballad, but it's a pretty kicking power ballad. And I have to say, it sounds really good, really awesome. The album that Extreme has coming out, this Winger album coming out, it sounds better than any of the crap that has come out in the last 20 years. Okay? I know I'm biased. Look at the tours people want to see. The 90s bands, they aren't out filling arenas. Guess who's filling arenas? It's the Def Leppards and the Motley Crues and the Poisons. Okay? And hopefully bands like Extreme and Winger, the melodic hard rock bands, they're coming back, because that music's more fun. And, I'm not a huge grunge fan. Doesn't mean there wasn't some talent there, but I so much preferred the great melodic rock, the classic rock of the 70s and 80s. And I'm super glad to see Winger's back. What a talented band that just got dissed by the record companies, along with a band like Giant, along with Extreme. So it's a great day for music, man. I know things have changed. The way we listen to music is different, but with streaming now, we can listen to all of this great stuff. So check out the new Wingers. There's two. They've released 2 songs. Extreme, the album might be out by now. I should know that, but I don't know. But 2 albums, especially Extreme and Winger, that you want to be checking out as they get released over the next few weeks. Hey, thanks so much for watching this update. We'll see you on the next one. Email me, classicguitarrock@mail.com, and we'll see you next time right here on the Classic Guitar Rock channel. Bye-bye.